Hey, Tom, I just wanted to mention, I don't know, that YouTube video hadn't come out yet, has it?
Yeah, it did. So so we're live now. So be on your best behavior like you usually are. And just to give you a heads up, there's a buddy of mine who's a member of the local model railroad club that I'm affiliated with, Rob Davis. And he's starting a YouTube series called The Best of the Best. And he is one of the most knowledgeable, articulate, experienced model railroaders, knows gauges and countries. And this is something that he's been wanting to do for a while. So he's put out this series in his YouTube. This is the first one that just came out. I'm going to send you guys the link later. But he starts off, he's going to do a series of what he considers 10 of the best. And it covers a wide range. You know, it's not just model railroading, but military, all aspects of the hobby in model railroading and modeling. And one of the things that really got me going is when he sent it to me, just to give him, you know, my point of view with it, the enthusiasm that he exudes is such a rush. And I was like, you know, whatever he was talking about, I mean, when it was over, I went up and just started tearing apart a turnout I'd been avoiding for like 2 weeks. I'm like, yeah, man, that's what it's about. So I'll be sure to share that all with you.
Just as a an aside, they do mention these posts on Rob's video.
Yeah. So we might
Tom's
get
one of the top 10 of the top 10.
Yeah, which I don't get, but okay. But you know, that's
Oh, I do. Don't even.
okay. All right, Val, thank you. I think we have Vince joining us.
Yes.
Cool.
Wait a minute. I don't know if I got to turn on my camera. Okay, good.
Welcome, Vince. Good morning.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Yeah, right. So I want to frame this out with the fact that there's not a lot that I put together with this presentation, just some photos of some locomotives that Roger sent me that I put together because I'm thinking, I'm not sure where people want to go, what they need to know. And so this is a bit of an improv session. So for those of you that have experience, it'd be great to have your points of view. And this will be mostly driven by you all. So I'm going to just share this screen with you. Bump. All right, move this out of the way.
Yeah.
There we go. I think. Cool. All right. So, you know, the original thought behind this was a couple of members were talking about how DCC was either just too complicated, too expensive. They wanted to ease into it and not make it too complicated for themselves. So we thought, hey, let's have a conversation around the advantages of just running DCC in addition to the ones I mentioned and see if people have any questions. So with that, Roger had done his work with showing me some, whoa, how'd that do that? There we go. Some of the work he's been doing with his River Rossies. Well, there we go. And it's just to show you the kinds of motors that are in there. And you know, as I'm talking to you, let me just stop for a second. What's your need or expectation from this conversation? So I know kind of where to drive it.
Just kind of glean what everybody else says. Yeah.
What's that, Bill?
Just try to glean, so you figure out what everybody else is doing stuff. Because I don't have a layout. I don't have room for it. However, I may be able to put one up in the near future because I want to put a shed outside. It'll be my workroom. I want to see about maybe putting a little shelf up there.
Okay. So just curious to see what other folks are doing, maybe pick up some ideas.
Yeah, I know years ago, I bought 3 of the Mantua Generals. And I was going to try to modify them a little bit into the original, the way that the General was originally built with the outside frame. And I can't find them now. They're lost up in the attic somewhere.
Oh, well,
I mean,
Yeah,
my experience is I started the hobby, back into the hobby seriously 5 years ago, and 6 years ago now. And I started out with DC with a layout. And I've probably spent more time retrofitting my DC layout to DCC and ripping it up and redoing it. Because when I first started doing it, I was concerned about DCC. And, you know, I just wanted to start and I didn't really plan everything out. So my experience here is I'm still running DCC. I have 30 generals between all the different types that I run actively. So I don't want to stop running DCC because I have so much equipment and I really like it, even though I love the DCC. You know, when you take that general off and you smell the oil, you don't get that from a DCC train. You know? So part of it is just nostalgia with me to keep doing the DCC.
you mean the DC?
The DC and the DCC.
Okay.
And, you know, I'm probably one of the few people that are trying to do both. And as my railroad has gotten bigger now, I'll probably have 100 linear feet of railroad by the end of this year. I haven't figured out the electrical work. I'm redoing all my manual throws to electrify the frogs. So my experience is if you are starting up, I could give you some do's and don'ts. And even though you don't think you're going to do DCC, you may want to consider spending a little bit more time doing things to prepare you in case you just want to switch over.
Got it. Yep.
I
Walter?
I was raised on DC and that's what I'm used to, but everybody says you got to go to DCC. So I just recently, when I built mine, I got a switch on it. So I can go either way, because especially some of these little locomotives, it's gonna be too much work. But I love this. I love the sound when you can have DC in a real speaker. But I've also had several people tell me, once you do DCC, you'll never go back. So I have the option. I just got to switch on my layout. I can make it go either way.
See, I do that too, Walter, but what happens is now that I'm expanding my layout, I want to put in a circuit breaker and all these other things that you really need to do for DCC.
Mm-hmm.
I'm struggling with trying to have, you know, that switch doesn't work when you really start to get advanced.
Well, see, I've got like 4 or 5 different zones, and you can get these breakers that if there's ever a short, it lights up and it doesn't blow a fuse. It just lights up.
Right, it's a limiter. It's a limiter, not a breaker, right?
And so that way I can isolate different zones on the track.
Yeah.
I find that's helpful.
The benefit of a circuit breaker is you can, I have bigger sections than others. You can modify the amperage per breaker. A limiter like what you're suggesting. That's why I didn't do what you're suggesting. Because I have one section's really big. And if I have 3 or 4 trains running on it, I may need more amperage there than somewhere else.
Well, it'd be interesting, a genuine thing on circuit breakers, because all I know of is just, I saw one thing a long time ago by just using a car light bulb.
Yep.
And this is a little bit more formal with, I can't remember who makes it, but it's like a little panel. It's got like 6 lights on it.
Yep.
They call them fuses, but they keep on going. That you can reuse. They're not genuine fuses. But I've never heard of a circuit breaker, so I would like to see that sometime if you could present that.
Vince, are you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that my experience is more on the equipment side. And I never did any with sound, but I've done a couple with DCC. And then when you start doing, we talked about this in other sessions, when you go down that path, then the balance of the locomotive or something else, you're into a mini project, especially if it's a one-off. But once you do all that, then what I find is that you have a lot of other things, legacy equipment. Like if you have metal couplers or I don't know, anything that can find a short will, if a pilot's sitting too low. And that's to me, you kind of opening up a big can. when you start going down that path. I'm not saying it's bad, but I kind of like the idea of what people are talking about, being able to bridge between the two of them, because once you have something working with DC, I'm more talking from the equipment point of view, then you can start looking at, okay, what is DCC qualified? And not just the locomotives, but you might have an illuminated passenger car, won't work in DCC.
Right.
So to me, that's interesting in how to ease into it. And then maybe the best practices for legacy equipment, not just the locomotives, but all the other things you might have around the layout. So,
No,
but yeah,
you're right.
whenever there's a
Just like
whenever there's
to-
short,
I-
it'll
I-
get found. And if
Right.
it's found with, DC, right, you can deal with it. When it's found with DCC, you're running at full rail. You have a major, and you could damage the equipment too if it's painted
yeah.
or something.
Actually, you can, there is a sort of DCC solution. You have illuminated passenger cars and stuff.
Of course.
If you
Yeah,
have the if you have the money.
Well, Walter,
You're
for
just going
instance,
down that path. And then I even
Yeah.
looked at putting a switch to just, and that's actually what I do now, is just put a little switch to just disable it. So
Right.
you don't have it, and then it's just out of the circuit. And then someday, if it's important, but yeah, you can do fabulous things. No doubt about it.
But if you're doing both, for instance, I had to make a decision on switches. And if I'm gonna connect my switches to my DCC system, when I'm running DC, I can't switch my turnouts. So I decided to go with manual for that reason.
Why are you still going to be using the manual ones? Are you going to,
I'm electrifying them.
so you're going to be using like the tortoise switch machines at Blue Points or something, or what?
No, I'm using the Caboose electrified. They're like $4 each. You could actually have a
okay,
manual throw that.
Okay, so you're still going to do the manual throw, but you're just going to have electrified troughs.
But I got to redo everything I did.
Well,
My advice to some people is, if you're not sure, think about that and do that up front, because it's a lot easier to do it first than it is to,
exactly.
I got to rip it up. It's really a pain.
Actually, if you ever lost your whole collection in a fire or something and you start fresh, that's the best way.
Ooh.
Get a big
Oh,
insurance check
oh.
and start fresh.
Or you move. There was a gentleman, if you move your house, and you can't move, that's how you restart it.
Well, Tom uses DCC to throw the turnouts. Tom? you
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
Okay. Let's give us some of your input on using DCC for those turnouts.
If I was, see, when I built this, I didn't know that manual was an option. Matter of fact, I didn't even build it. It was the guys from this company, Rail Dreams, that I had build it. And, I trusted them to do what they needed to do. And they did a great job. But when they put the system in, all the turnouts went through the throttle. So each turnout has a decoder underneath the layout. And some of these will handle 4 turnouts. And then they're just programmed so that you can do the throw from your throttle. Which in the beginning, I was thinking, because I wanted to do operations, I was thinking I have a throttle for the brakeman and a throttle for the engineer. And the one with the brakeman can just throw the switches. But that was way too complicated and that didn't work. But going forward, I would do manual. I mean, for me, it's a manual railroad. They didn't have automatic stuff back then.
Right.
Now,
That's the other thing.
if you want to do automatic, absolutely cool. I mean, there's no right or wrong, as we know, with all this stuff. But when I went to see one of the great narrow gauge modelers. He's been in the Gazette many times. This guy passed away about 6, 7, maybe 10 years ago. Paul Scholes. Anybody heard that name, Paul Scholes? So I was at Seattle doing an interview for a job, and I hooked up with Paul. He invited me over to his house. And he showed me all these manual throws on the fascia of his layout. I was like, oh my God. And then he actually took the time after I left and he did a diagram of how he built these. And my mind exploded. I mean, like in a bad way. When I looked at how much engineering and machining and everything he did, I'm like, this is not happening. I'm just going to keep it simple. But over the years, you know, there's like the Blue Points came out, and there's so many different ways to do manual. So if you really want to do a period layout, again, it's always a matter of how prototypical do you want to be? And for me, I like to try to bring it down to the specificity as possible. So I would shoot for manual, because there's so many, at least maybe not so many, but there's certainly some choices out there that you could relatively easily replicate. And the other thing that's cool about not having it on the throttle, if you want to do something with another guy, so you have a crew of 2, somebody's responsible for throwing the turnouts, and you can have the engineer just focus on running the locomotive. It makes it more interesting and collaborative. So yeah, that's what it was for me. And I love the NCE system. I love it. It's just, yeah. And I was wondering, so Ron, do you have Digitrax?
Oh, NCE.
Oh, you do? Oh, it's another smart guy. Okay.
No,
Thanks, Tom.
your layout is all points.
Mine?
You're not running stubs, right?
I have stubs.
Do you?
Yep.
Yeah, see, as I've thought about it, I've thought, you know, again, the idea that manual is more realistic. I mean, in terms of the actual movement, and it's a lot easier to build from what I'm looking at in terms of fast tracks. Building a stub, it's a lot easier to build a stub that's a manual than some of the technology, some of the things you got to be able to do in terms of getting those, because the point machines or the switch machines are designed for points. They're not designed for stubs.
Interesting.
You've got to make enough adjustments in them to get them to work properly. And yeah, I'm going to do all stubs. So it's like I've already it's like I'm going to use ground throws. I'm just.
Yeah, right on top, right on the benchmark, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and I could have done that. Yeah, I hear you. I built my railroad too soon. I needed you guys 15 years ago.
The one negative that is about all manual throws, depending how your layout is, like my layout is 4 feet wide in a few places. If you got to start leaning over to throw the throws, you could start like disrupting, you know, the scenery and all that other stuff. So like,
Oh yeah.
you see, like you're putting in the blue points. In some cases, I've decided to put some blue points in so I can control everything in one spot.
Another alternative to the Blue Points is 2 fast tracks. They offer a kit they call it the Bullfrog, and those are the ones that I have. I haven't built one yet, but they just look like simplicity itself. To put it
Bullfrog is the manufacturer.
No, there's 2 fast tracks, and there's switch machines that they make that are called Bullfrogs.
Got it.
As no relation to the Bullfrogs that you put on the wheels.
Yeah, you know, that's, you know, to your point, Paul, about the distance and the reach on Charlie Taylor's layout. That's exactly what he did, because he's got a couple of switches that are in the middle of a. Sorry about that, guys. My light keeps falling off. Back to Amazon. He's got a couple of turnouts that are in the middle of his peninsula, and he did a beautiful job. Matter of fact, I should get Charlie to take some more photos of that, because it shows how simple it really was to rig that. And he's got fast tracks, and he's got it just on the edge of the fascia, and they work brilliantly.
Yeah.
Yep.
For my switches, I've just been doing point. Stubs are beyond me right now. And Barrett Hill has a really nice kind of switch where you have it just, you know, piece of glass, you have your layout on it, and you just touch the glass and it'll change it. Kind of the same technology like cell phones use for touch screens.
Oh, geez.
And but it's actually pretty simple. He's got it worked out pretty well. I like I like it though. For realism, I am toying with going to ground, physical ground throws.
I
Oh,
think the ground throws look good on the layout, if you're modeling.
Yep.
We're modeling. So.
Walt, did you say
Walter?
this guy's, I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask Walter. So did you say these are the touch toggles?
Yeah, the touch toggles.
Yeah, I talked to that guy and they are freaking awesome. And I was already going to install those. A friend of mine says, yeah, we could do that. I said, you sure? He goes, yeah. So he starts drilling holes in the fascia of my layout in order to install them. And after he got about half, like 20 of them drilled, I said, wait a minute, maybe we should test this out before we keep doing this. And he said, that's a good idea. So we tested it out and it didn't work. I'm like, shit. Oh, excuse me.
What?
But
Yeah.
I had
So-
no problems with it. They work great so far for me.
yes, they look like they would be fabulous. I think what my friend was intending, the way he had configured in his head just wouldn't work. And me being the electronic neophyte that I am, I had no idea what to consider. So we let it go. But I think the touch toggles, because that is brilliant. It is manual. You don't have to And the thing I like about that too, Walt, is that with the knob sticking out of the fascia, I'm always concerned that it's tempting for someone to want to just play with that. Or if it's sticking out, somebody's going to catch, their jacket or something on it. So if you have those, I would even suggest recessing them in the fascia so that they're flat.
Walter, what era are you modeling? I'm trying to remember.
Well, right now for getting started, it's just a 4x4 layout. And it's a general kind of 1950s, but I love the Civil War and I want to be able to, when I get a chance, do a more 1850 to 70. So the Civil War will be in there.
Cool.
What have we heard from? So Roger.
Okay.
Well, go ahead.
Tom, one other thing.
Go ahead.
Keep in mind that if we are modeling the 1860s, you have to, you can't just automatically go through the turnouts. You kind of have to have someone throwing the switches, which means they have to get off the train, walk up to the switch and throw it. Though with some of those speeds, I suppose they could run up and throw it ahead of time. And then they have to throw it back to the way it's supposed to be set after the train passes. So, slowing down at least for the turnouts while you manually throw them, it should not be a big issue. That seems like it's more prototypical than going through an interlocking system of some type.
I do recall reading or listening to somebody talk about there's an operations session where they take into consideration the time that it does take to walk and blah, blah, and they build that into the schedule so that, it's not like just a 1 minute stop. And, and so that's what's so insane about the hobby. You can get into such minutia and, it could either inspire you or make you crazy. But
I love that stuff.
good. You can come to my house, Walt. We'll get along fine, right? Yeah, I know. Well, eventually I want to have, I know, let's see, Charlie's got the equipment. I believe Bernie's already doing it, and Don Ball does it with phones, but they have, Bernie and Charlie are figuring out ways to use a telegraph for their dispatcher. And that's pretty off the charts. That's not going to happen here. Shit, I can't even get the damn turnouts to run straight sometimes.
If you wanted to use a telegraph system, you could do something with some old tin cans, nail, wire, and your old DC.
That's
train
my
transformer.
speed, right?
Your old TV train transformer, the old DCC one. You know, that little old Tyco that might have 2 or 3 lying around.
Yes.
Yes.
They're for your telegraph system, Tom.
Mm.
I have a question on DC. I've never really run 2 engines at once. Does anybody run like 2 engines at once on DC, and how do you do that?
Paul, I mean, right now I just have a single lineup, okay? So transformer and a Noble. One thing, the only thing I have a suggestion on that is if it provides enough power to the 2 motors you have on the track, or more, as the case may be, they'll go around fine. Just make sure one is not too quick, because it will catch up with the other.
Well, that's the problem I've been having. I guess you got to like do a consist. You got to try to find 2 engines that are similarly with the power.
Correct.
Which
And that's
all the
been my
engines I have,
experience.
that's tough. All my stuff is meant to, depending how good you fix them or how well.
What you need to do, Paul, is create power districts that you can turn on and off that are isolated from one another. So that way, if you want to.
I plan on doing that. I plan on having four districts.
Yeah, so then what, since they're isolated, so if you have one system that's all connected and you put multiple trains on it, obviously as you turn the throttle, they're all going to speed up and slow down and go in the same direction all at the same time. If you split them up into power districts by isolating them, then each one will operate and function different. You can actually have one sitting on a siding and not moving at all, because you can turn that district off. And that's how, at least everything I've read as I've tried to get myself up to speed on how to wire this thing, is that when that was the way DCC was done, so you can have multiple trains operating at the same time.
If you'd
You
like
say
to be authentic, it's helpful to remember that in the old days, things went wrong a lot and they had a lot of wrecks.
Yeah.
That's just part of railroading.
That's my layout.
So Ron, when you say separated, you still have one transformer?
Yeah, you just have, when you run your power bus underneath, what the biggest thing is that there's insulations put between the rails.
Right, I plan on doing
So that you've got 4 separate districts, and so they're all powered independently.
right. So when it hits the other district,
Yeah, that, and then you run into where you have to have, double pulse switches, so you can turn one district off and one district on as trains move from one district to the other. It gets a little complicated, but there's a lot of literature on how to do power districts in DCC.
Yeah. Yeah, when I did DC, I had an MRC, the dual power pack they produced. But for each siding, I had a switch on off power to every single siding, dead end sidings, whatever, return loops, so that theoretically I could be running 2 trains. I could have like 10 trains on the layout, but only 2 I could operate at the same time. But you have to be real careful about what was going where, when.
right.
Because, and you have to know exactly when you're passing from one district to another. And to me, that's one of the advantages the DCC systems. I don't have to worry about that anymore.
But if you're running train dispatches with telegraph, the train has to stop so that somebody can hop off and go into the telegraph operator and see where things are at. So you can replicate that with the stoppage in the DC format.
That's true.
But if you're specifically talking about consisting, okay, I live in a little apartment. That's why I'm doing in scale. But when I was going to do HO, there's a thing called Rail Pro. And now it's got bigger decoders. So that I know, the last I've heard, they still don't do in. But if you're doing HO or bigger, they got a feedback loop that when you use Rail Pro, you tell your throttle, okay, I want these 2 engines, and it'll check the pull and everything on it. So you can have even 2 different engines with 2 different whole pulling structures and amperage flow and all that stuff, and it'll match them, and you can consist them. And I've seen some demos where he'll put one around, and if you have one slow down, the other one's anyway, it totally will match consisting up to I don't know how many engines and with different pulls.
That's for DC?
No, DCC.
Oh, the
DCC, yeah.
DCC.
No, on DCC, Digitrax, you could do it to,
And you can sort, last I saw on Digitrax and I got NCE for my N scale. But when they do consisting, they just send the same voltage to each one. So if you're close, it will match. But if you're going to have any kind of different stuff, the Rail Pro, I find I don't know if, unless of course things are always updating. But last I heard, their way of matching, the speed matching and so on for the two locomotives is unparalleled.
That sounds
yeah.
great, because when you do the consist through the providers, whether it's Digitrax or whoever, you've got to program them.
right.
Yeah,
With this, it sounds like you bypass all of that.
you do. Yeah.
Wow.
He
It's
put like
kind of-
one, like I said, there's a demo we had like a little 440 and then some big, super modern diesel, put them together and they both pull equally.
Wow.
But you have to use their decoders, correct?
Yeah. And but they now recently, as of about 2 years ago, they make their decoders so they also work with NCE and Digitrax. So if you do put their decoders in, you're not stuck with only doing that. You can go somewhere and use the regular NCE.
Wow. Oh, okay.
But then you don't have George.
Right.
Tom,
Whatever
Tom, you
George
can't get
sells,
your
I'm
trees to
buying.
run
because
now. You're gonna put them in
I want to
the
have
decoder.
George.
You know what? I've pulled so many locomotives off the layout. I could probably, redo the
Do
4 that
everything.
are in the shop. I'm gonna look into that. That's a good one. Thank you, Walter. Yeah. Hi, Daryl. Welcome.
Hi, guys.
So, what are you doing? HO or what are you up to?
What I'm doing is I'm modeling the Bel Air, Zanesville, and Cincinnati Railroad, which you've probably never heard of.
Which
But
one?
it's the predecessor to the Ohio River and Western narrow gauge railroad from Bel Air, Ohio, over towards Cincinnati. And I'm modeling it in 1885. And Bel Air, of course, is where the B&O Railroad came through, and also the Cleveland and Pittsburgh Railroad, and the Ohio Southern Railroad went south from there. So there's 3 standard gauge railroads and the narrow gauge railroad. I'm primarily focusing on the BZ and C and using HO. I retired just a year and a half ago, so now I'm starting to have some time to get back into things. I have a lot of information on this, but not a whole lot of modeling progress. My intention is to do dioramas, basically. I don't have room to have a full operational layout, but I would like to have at least operational dioramas. The locomotives, for example, this one here is BZMC number 2, 440, made by Brooks. And for that, I have a Ken Kidder 440, actually a model of a Japanese engine that the Ken Kidder actually comes out very close. I just need to make a little bit of modification of the cab to get a almost identical looking locomotive. The locomotive number 1 was a national locomotive for which I have the good old Bachmann 440, which again is a very small. Actually, I'm not modeling HO, I'm modeling S scale. And so I'm using HO locomotives as SM3 engines, using HO track until I decide that I actually want to convert these engines, narrow the frames down and everything to HO scale, SM3. Anyway, the Bachmann works out in S scale to be that smaller national locomotive almost perfectly. And for the other 4 locomotives I need, I'm using the Mantua 460 as the platform. And the Mantua 460, I have already modified a couple of them. The drivers are not displaced as in on the Mantua, they are equally spaced. And so I know a new driver's slot for the rear axle and move it forward and modify the frame and then rebuild a new chassis to go on top of the whole thing. So
Wow.
I hope someday to build a couple of S gauge, standard gauge locomotives for the B&O, such things as the Winans Camel and the Crab locomotive and whatnot. When the B&O took over the Central Ohio Railroad in I don't remember the exact date, something like 1868. Of course, the Central Ohio still had several locomotives that had been in service during the Civil War, but the Central Ohio was a Ohio gauge, which was 5 foot. And when the B&O took it over, it wasn't too long before they switched it to standard gauge. And so a lot of those old Central Ohio locomotives were retired, but a few of them were actually converted to the standard gauge. So old locomotives, and that's basically why I'm involved in the Civil War Railroad group, is because you guys have the information, the how to convert, all that stuff. Nobody is doing 1885 and S scale. There's a fair amount of SM3 out there, but not for 1885 and not for the B and BZ and C.
That is quite a niche.
Are you gonna have any dual gauge track, or are you planning on just going to having some narrow and some standard gauge as far as?
Now the Ohio River and Western in later years did have dual gauge track, but in my era, 1885, the BZ and C did not have any dual gauge track.
But when you go to the when you're converting to the HO scale, you probably aware of this, the Ohio River Western makes those boxcars now. But they make an HO scale narrow gauge boxcar that I've actually taken. It's a 24-foot version. And I've taken them, I've actually converted, backdated them, and made them to standard gauge, like an early boxcar.
Almost looks like that locomotive is right there in his living room.
Yeah. Which is a better?
I can use Mantua.
Platform?
Light's not good, but this is the Mantua boxcar modified to a BZ and C.
All right. Yeah.
And here's I have no idea. I got this one a long time ago, and I have no idea what brand it is. But it's a flat car, HO scale flat car converted to a BZ and C flat car. So I can do some freight cars using HO scale. Basically, the HO scale Civil War era models as a basis for the at least some of the narrow gauge cars.
Right.
The passenger cars were a combination of the Jackson and Sharp and a couple other varieties. They had both the clerestory roof Jackson and Sharp cars, but they also had some round roof Jackson and Sharp cars.
Hmm. Bill, you're gonna ask a question?
Yeah, I've thought about DCC, but before I start building things, but I don't know which system to get. I don't know which to me they're all like Greek. I just can't. I'm able to understand it all.
You're asking like which system would be the preferred?
Yeah. Yes.
Wow, I've got my biased.
Right. Yeah.
The club that I'm affiliated with uses Digitrax, and I, by default, through Rail Dreams, they put in NCE, and I just like the throttle. I like I just like all the elements of it. And you're gonna have guys that would say, the Digitrack is their preferred.
Yes.
Ideally, if you could get yourself hooked up with some modelers near you where you could watch and see how they use their systems, that would be the best way to get an idea what would work for you. I'm always a big proponent of joining the local NMRA group. I have learned, 99% of these guys do, like 40s, 50s, 60s, but there's similarities with the systems.
Right.
Doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
And they've been such a help around educating me as to like advantages and disadvantages to a variety of things. So join the NMRA, get hooked up in some operation sessions and see what appeals to you.
Okay. I'll look into it. Thank you.
Yep. What else? Roger.
Roger.
I'm back.
Where are you with your layout, Roger?
Still trying to figure out how we're going to attack table work. And I'm trying to define the zones that I want and get going from there. I need to have a frank, as I mentioned before, I need to have a frank discussion with my brother, who frankly does plenty of woodwork. And it would be to my advantage to have his assistance on that, and then start making some critical decisions on where I want the zones so that I can simplify the process and get things going.
Right.
Because like DC was talking about, every siding that I have, I want to define so I can park trains there and go from there.
Got it. So Daryl, you're wanting to share, I see. Just to close off that point with Roger, I think it's a fabulous idea to, include anybody that has expertise around something that you don't.
Precisely.
And the fact that you have somebody that can do the bench work or is familiar with carpentry, between
or at
DC,
least get his assistance on it, mental assistance on it, so I can get going.
Right. Cool. So Daryl, what is it that you're showing us here?
Museum.
Or 6 no, yeah. Beautiful.
Is this, are you sharing this to tell us this is something that you're modeling?
He's on mute.
Daryl, you're on mute.
Yeah, I was doing a share screen on that, and I'm never done that before. So it blocked when I shared the screen. It blocked me off of Zoom, so I couldn't control anything. So that was the Thatcher Perkins, which is of course the old B&O locomotive that's in the B&O Museum, and that is one of the standard gauge locomotives that I would hope to build.
And what are you using for you're using a Japanese locomotive to do that?
Well, the Ken Kidder
Ken Kidder
460 is for the BZ&C engine number 1.
Got it.
I think that's the National Locomotives Works engine. No, it's not. I forget who that was built. Number 2 is the National. Anyway, the Thatcher Perkins was a built engine. They built their own engines. Ross Winans, of course, built the Camels, and Hayes built the 460 Camels and whatnot. So
Got it. Cool. God.
those are all going to be scratch built, basically. Wow.
Rock and roll. That's fabulous, man. That's very good.
There have been a few Camel models built based on. Now there is a Mantua 280 engine, which is modified frame from the 460. The 280 would make a decent frame for beginning of the Winans Camel. The wheelbases work out nicely. The wheel diameter works out nicely, but I would have to widen the stance from HO gauge to S and build the superstructure on top of it. But it might not be a bad place to start.
Cool. Andy, is there something you, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Daryl, they're the April 1949 model railroader. Got the Hayes Camel 10-wheeler Camelback. All drawn in O scale, but it's got a full 20-page article on how to scratch build it if you're interested. April 1949.
Yep.
You look, so what do you have? The collection of model railroaders from back then?
No, I just picked this one up because
Oh.
that was in it. So
Got it. Yeah, very cool. Yes, it's there was a guy that was doing a series, Jerry Leone, and he was reviewing all these little tips. He has a video series through Model Railroader Video Plus, and he does tips and something else. And this one series, he had gone back and reviewed different articles back from probably the 40s. And so many of them are even still relevant today. So it's fabulous and fascinating. I mean, the wealth of data and information that's out there, the only thing that's disturbing about it, there's so much. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I start looking for one thing and then I go off on all kinds of tangents. Right? Oh, what is this? And then I forget what the hell I was looking for in the beginning. God.
Information is scattered. You find it where you find it, and you would hope that you could get a lot of information browsing the internet. But I find that for something as obscure as what I'm doing, there really isn't a whole lot of information on the internet. I actually end up going to the library, going through a lot of old books and pulling books out of storage and finding tidbits here and there, finding the Central Ohio roster that was turned over to the B&O Railroad and when those engines were actually retired, and that list with all those dates and who made the locomotives and all that information. It's not on the internet. You have to go to the library and get a book and do some research.
That's so true, Daryl. I think to your point about the difficulty in finding information, it's the tried and true Library of Congress, local libraries, and everything else where you just do some digging, and it's amazing what's really there. They just can't get it all on the internet, or it hasn't really been a need or a draw enough for people to want to convert it.
Yeah,
Right.
very true.
Or researchers who's once they've got their information, their willingness to share it on the internet. That can be a surprisingly big factor.
Right. Yeah. Like when I look at some of the videos that some of these fabulous modelers are doing, and the production quality of how they use the camera, how they show the step-by-step process, and I've considered doing that, yeah, I was thinking about doing that as I was doing the, this last bit of scenery on the layout. But it's just beyond my comprehension around how to do this. Because I get such value out of watching how other people build stuff. And I'm thinking, geez, I'd like to be able to pay that back by showing some things I'm doing, but it's, yeah, that'll be for the next railroad that I build.
The one in Hawaii.
Yeah, or Tennessee or Virginia. I don't know. Right. When we move. God. Good. So, just for going forward, unless anybody has anything else to say, I just want to give you a sense of what we're going to be doing going forward. Any final questions or comments?
A little bit, Tom.
Hey, Tom.
You guys got me into doing a lot of stuff now with how cranes. We're taking about 5 or 6 engines. They're all Bachmann. I now have another 5 Mantuas. And I also picked up another engine. I don't know if you can see it or not, but let's see what I can do. Nope.
No, your virtual screen is in the way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. Well, anyway, it's a Texas brass.
Whoa.
So I picked it up since I had all these generals. I had to get a Texas. And I don't know if you can see this either, but this is my controls for my switches.
Oh, wow. Nice.
And you have to, it's an operating switch control.
Did you make that?
No, it's from DCC Concepts. Okay. I'll put this stuff out on the group too, with links and stuff.
Excellent.
This is, it's kind of hard to see it, I guess.
Yeah.
But this is one controller from, or a box of the controllers. They're expensive. This is 12 of them. And what you can see, off the sides and stuff like that. But there's 12 of them in there. That's about $200 and something.
How much?
$200 and something.
For 12 of them.
Yeah.
Do they get mounted
And
onto the bench next to the turnout?
you can put it anywhere you want. You can figure out where you want to do it. It's kind of nice with DCC Concepts. They have where it'll have, let's see if I can get.
Yeah, you'd have to cut out your virtual screen.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that.
Stay on and I'll show you how to do that later.
Yeah. And anyway, I can take pictures of the stuff and things like that and send them out. Yeah, I do want to talk to you some about DCC and stuff like that. I have a couple engines with DCC controllers in them now. And I've got to convert a whole bunch of other ones. You don't have sound in your car engines, do you?
I do.
Okay, well, I talked about that too. Because a lot of the Mantuas naturally don't, have sound or DCC.
No, matter of fact, that's one of the things I'm going to be planning on in the near future is a conversation around DCC sound decoders for your locomotives. That'll be one of the upcoming meets.
Yeah. Soundtracks make some good ones. I'm used to them with the OM30 group because I've got that. Now I'm doing another layout, which will be the American Civil War.
Cool.
So, and I've got quite a few engines of that now. My train room is now under construction. And so hopefully in the next few weeks, I'll have a train room. Got a lot of work going on around here.
Well, that's a perfect segue into, another couple of meets that we're going to do will be layout updates. And I'm hoping to get some volunteers from like DC and Ron, and I'm going to put the press on Roger to get motoring for his. I think Paul's got some things to share. I know Charlie does. So there's a lot of fellas that are really motoring with their layouts, and I think it would be very cool to see what folks are accomplishing. And we'll get Tom and you two in there as well. And yeah, so that's what's upcoming. So stay
About 15
tuned.
years, about 15 years ago, I
May I
started in
may I
the,
interject here that
Wait,
I started with one group and they, DC or Digitrax. So I have a Digitrax system.
right.
I hate it.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
And 30, when I started in that, my northern group, they use MRC,
oh,
and my southern group uses NCE.
wow.
So now I have Digitrax, MRC, and NCE.
What do you,
They're all
what do you,
systems.
what do you like the best?
Well, Digitrax I use, I don't use that anymore. That's terrible. It's sitting on a shelf. If anybody wants to buy it, give me $100, it's yours.
I would say if you want to sell it,
It's an old system, but it's still a good booster, okay, for the new systems.
put it out to the group, Tom. Put it out to the
yeah.
group. Maybe you'll have a taker.
Okay. Like I said, that was just a side comment, but NCE is fantastic. A little bit more harder than MRC. MRC, the nice thing is that I can't remember that command. What is it? Turn the controller over and all the commands are right there. Okay.
Got it.
So it makes it a lot easier. But
Okay.
with my system, the way I set it up on the layout, because some of the systems use a 4-wire, some use a 6-wire, some use an 8-wire. My system, I can, in about 30 seconds, I can change from Digitrax to NCE to MRC.
That's
It
great.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because my connections on the layout, you plug in your controller of NCE, and as long as I've got the NCE control, running the system, it works.
Right.
Oh, you want
Cool.
MRC? I'll change it to MRC. Now you can take the NCE controller out, plug in an MRC, and it worked just fine.
Wow. Good.
You know, it's super simple, and the cost from the different ones for, you know, your layout connections is cheaper.
Right.
But it's made generic. So any one of the systems, all I have to do is change the controller. Now I can plug in my hand controllers anywhere.
Right. Well, that'll be one that we could talk, put in the meet as well, is maybe some conversation around people's different experiences with different systems. So, yeah.
Definitely set up something for the
Yeah.
layout controller or connections. I
Right.
think it'll make it good for everybody because it's a lot easier and it's cheaper
Yep.
than buying it from NCE or MR.
I just want to point out that if you guys notice, Vince put up a couple of links
Yes.
for the Barrett Hill and DCC concepts. That'll also show up in the recording in case you don't get a chance to copy that. So wow, it always blows me away that an hour and a half goes by so fast. And it was great seeing you. I was surprised to see this many people, but it's always a joy and a continued motivation. That's why I figured anytime I do these meets, I always make sure I got 2 hours after, because I'm right back on the railroad after these. It's like I want to use this energy to apply to where it's needed most, which is the railroad. So thank you guys. It was great seeing you all as always. Stay well, stay healthy, and enjoy whatever you're doing. Hope to see you again soon.
All right, guys.
Likewise.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
DC, I'm going to send you a link to try to set something up.